Hey YouTube, it's Faye, and for today's video, we're gonna be doing everybody's favorite, that's right, drum brakes on this Generation 2 Toyota Tacoma. Now to add insult to injury, it is 106 degrees out and I've turned off the fan so you can hear me in this tutorial. So if that is not proof that I really want you guys to know how to do this job, I don't know what is. So a couple tips and tricks right off the bat is that you should do one at a time. Don't be taking one side apart and then the other side in the exact same fashion. We want to do one at a time so that we can use the other side as our model, just in case you don't have the repair manual or you don't have like an exploded diagram or something like that. Another tip is take a ton of pictures as you're doing this job so you know how everything is set up. Obviously you can see I've already got my wheel off, I've already got my drum off. Now to get the drum off, I do a very similar fashion to removing the front rotors. On the drum, there's two little threaded holes where I can insert some bolts. Just run those down with my impact and pop it off. Alternatively, you can also go to the back side of the drum, pop off that little rubber grommet, and you can actually adjust the brakes in or make them much more loose, and that will help get that drum off. Here you can see the little adjuster inside there, so you can just loosen that up, and that will bring the shoes in and give you more clearance to slide that drum off if you're having problems and that drum isn't coming off for you. Here are all of the tools that I use to do this job. We use some anti-seize as well as brake parts lubricant, a lot of brake clean, rags, and gloves. This is optional, but some people like to mark when they've done something just to be able to look back on something. Obviously, pocket screwdriver. I mean, what job do you not need one of these with a little magnetic tip, a flashlight? Actually, I use multiple flashlights. Here are some essential drum brake tools. As you will see, I could not do this job without this little hook. This thing is, what a lifesaver. And this guy as well. I'm gonna link both these in the description below. This for our little spring clips, little wire brush for cleaning. Got pliers, two different types of flathead screwdriver that are larger. These dikes, I mean, this is what I use in the video, but this is way, way overkill. A little 10mm wrench. Actually, a line wrench would be preferred if you have one, but this was just what I had. A little 10mm socket on my teeny tiny little ratchet. And then these bolts for removing the drum, and they happen to be a 12mm. So I've got my 12mm socket, and I've got my little impact. This is an alternate for adjusting. This is, you know, what should be kind of included in the drum brake specialty tools. I actually didn't use this, but this is just something a lot of people use. So if you have one of these, go ahead and use it. Yeah, impact this. So helpful. This is a drum brake, basically like shoe adjustment tool. You could also use a tape measure. I don't know. These are cheap, and for me, they're just so worth it because it makes adjusting their drum brakes a lot easier. And then while I don't go into bleeding brakes into this tutorial because I have a whole nother tutorial that goes really in depth just about bleeding brakes, this is some stuff that you should have for the job, especially if you're going to be replacing your wheel cylinders like I did. Obviously, a lot of brake fluid. Bleeder, especially if you're by yourself, and then this bottle sits on top of the master cylinder, and I will link my brake bleeding video in the description below as well, so you can head on over to that one once you're done with your drum brakes and you want to bleed. But some people this is not going to apply to because you're not going to replace the wheel cylinders, so I am not including this part in this video. Now for the parts that I'm using for this job, I'm installing the full PowerStop Z36 truck and tow brake upgrade kit, both front and rear, since this truck does a lot of off-roading, hauling, and carries a lot of weight. So we have the auto specialty brake shoes, the full hardware kit, and these drums all from PowerStop. All right, so that is everything, and I will link this stuff in the description below. Now that we have the drum off, we're just gonna do a quick inspection of the shoes, which is our friction material. So you can see that on the leading edge, we do not have a lot of material going on at all. And in fact, if I'm gonna use my little brake pad thickness gauge, yes, this is a brake pad thickness gauge because the colors really do correspond to the front pads in terms of severity. The rear shoes are gonna have way different measurements in terms of like when they're considered to be good and when they're considered to be bad. So this would not be a red actually, even though it's only 3mm here, maybe a little less than. Yeah, all right, it's closer to 2. 2mm for shoes actually isn't awful. I wouldn't tell this customer that they needed shoes right away or a full drum brake job. The reason why we're doing this actually is because this truck carries a ton of weight. Just from here, you can see the rooftop tent, the smart cap, and obviously we've got some massive wheels and tires going on. Also, this customer, who happens to be my husband Brandon, tows a trailer a lot with his fishing boat on it, and we had some problems with the front brakes, so I just decided to do all the brakes all the way around, front and rear. And today we are upgrading. There's my truck. Hi, Grim. My 3rd Gen 4Runner. So today we are upgrading to the Power Stop. We've got these. Look at these nice new shoes. Obviously have a ton of life on them compared to the stock shoes we've got going on there. But look, even brand new, these aren't ever gonna measure in the green according to the chart for disc brakes, right? So let's measure them right now. Brand new, these are starting out at 5 millimeters. So this green, yellow, and red really does not apply. So normally though, once I get to less than 2 millimeters, I'll let a customer know, hey, it's definitely time to replace your rear brakes. But in this case, like I said, we're upgrading. So these shoes, along with, here's the drum right here, we're doing the full Z36 truck and tow upgrade kit, front and rear. And so this is just part of that job. And as you can see, I ordered obviously all the springs and everything that we need to do this job. So all of our hardware is here. And also from the dealership, I got new wheel cylinders as well. And there is the part number for that. Obviously, I will link all the parts and all the tools that I used in the description below. So, all right, let's get to this. Now, where's one to start when doing this job? Now, according to the repair manual, they're actually gonna tell you to remove this spring first. However, this spring is super, super, super heavy duty. I have a little bit of a hard time removing that. I'm not that strong. So what I like to do is I like to loosen the shoes first to give me a little bit of wiggle room around, and then that can help me sort of lift this out and up. One thing you really wanna be careful of though, if you're not gonna be replacing the wheel cylinder, which once again, I am, so I don't really have to worry about this, but if you're not replacing the wheel cylinder, you don't want to push the shoe all the way in super hard in either direction and then accidentally push the seal out. I've actually had that happen, and then I've accidentally torn the seal. So yeah, you don't want to do that, because if you don't have these on hand, then this vehicle is stuck disabled on your lift while you're waiting to get these parts in. So I also like to order these, even if I'm not going to be replacing them, I will order the wheel cylinders just to have, and I can always return them. Even in this case, like they were a special order from the dealership. See, there's my name on them. Distance and Pixie. I'll have them even if I don't think that I want to replace them, just in case something terrible happens to these precious little wheel cylinders. Also, until you get the wheel off and the drum off, you don't happen to know if these are leaking, and this truck has 188,000 miles on it, so I'm just going to be replacing it preemptively, and I'll save these as a spare just to throw in our overlanding kit or something like that. Not that I would ever do drum brakes on the side of the road, but you never know. So in this case, I'm going to forego the recommendation of the repair manual, and I'm going to remove these first. However, in this case, I'm actually going to be replacing these lug studs with longer ones. Let me show you. Here are my lug studs. So I'm going to be replacing these today as well to accommodate the wheels. We're only catching a few threads on these lug studs, and you can kind of tell just from looking at them, just like the wear pattern, there's not a lot of threads that we're actually catching on here, and that is definitely a safety issue. So in this case, what I'm going to be starting with in order to get these studs out and replaced is this little adjuster here for the star wheel. This is how you adjust your shoes in and out. This is actually a little stopper. I don't know if you can see in there. Yeah. That little tab that sits into the star wheel there. I'm going to be removing this first, and this teeny little spring, and those two. After removing those, I'll have this wonderful space right here to pop every single one of those studs out. So that's what I'm going to do first, and in a second you're just going to see these magically get longer. If you're interested in my lug stud replacement video, I will link that in the description below, because I'm sure that I'm going to make that video first, because it's going to be a lot easier to edit. I love this thing. Can't do drum brakes without this. I'm just gonna sneak in and pull this little fella out without ruining the light for you guys, so you can actually see. And just sneak that out, just like that. All right, longer lug studs installed. These are actually OE off of a, I think, 03 to 06 Toyota Matrix. But like I said, I'll link that video in the description below if you're interested. So, yep, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull these little springs right here, and I'm gonna do that with a special tool. This guy right here. So with one hand, I'm gonna hold on to the back side of the pin, And here I am on the back side. This is where I'm pushing down my finger on the back side of this little pin because it's coming through the backing plate. So I'm just holding pressure on that so that I don't accidentally push it through when I'm trying to compress the spring and push it out, that little center pin. And with the other tool, which has these little jagged edges in there for grabbing the outside of this little cup, I'm gonna push in and twist. Ta-da! The twisting action is basically, so this little guy starts out life in that position right there. And what my goal is to do with this tool, as it grabs around the outside and pushes in on that spring, my goal is to push this down and rotate so that this little pin can come out of that little slot. All right, let's do the other side now. So here we go. I got my hand on the back side of the spring, awkwardly so you can see. And I'm pushing in on that cup and twisting just 90 degrees to release it. There we go. And of course, I'm saving all these little parts so I can compare with my new parts, because every now and then you order the wrong thing by mistake. Next I'm gonna do is I'm gonna release this lower spring right here that holds the bottom of both the shoes together. And then I'm also gonna release this spring that holds this little e-brake in place. And really what my goal is here is to keep both of the shoes with their springs as assembled as possible. That way I'm not just pulling off a bunch of springs and just throwing everything about and then trying to remember how everything went back together. I'm gonna basically use what's already here as a template for myself. So going to this bottom one first. Once again, my handy dandy little J-hook tool. Come here. This little one that holds our e-brake bracket, I'm gonna leave on this side because it's actually holding this little piece in place, and I wanna keep all that with this shoe. So over on this side here is where I'm gonna release it. So we're just gonna give it a little. So that's where we are for the bottom. Now everyone's loose on the bottom here. Just want to make note of these paint marks. I love this right here on the e-brake where it sits. So you can see how someone previously, whoever did these brakes before, or maybe this is from the factory, but this little line here just showing where these are gonna sit. I like this. That's gonna really help with reassembly. Now from here, my next order of business is to remove this forward-facing shoe, or the shoe that's facing the front of the vehicle. The tricky part, of course, is getting this spring undone, and I struggle with this. This is a very, very strong spring. So see, now that this is loose, I have a lot more movement though, which is gonna make it easier for me to get this spring out. I'm gonna give myself a little bit more slack in between. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually turn in this star wheel adjuster, almost like pretending like I'm adjusting the brakes, except instead of pushing them out, I'm pushing these two back in, which is gonna give me a little bit more room to move this. So there you go. You know that you've adjusted it all the way when you don't see any more threads left. So now this little star wheel adjustment piece is adjusted as far in as it can possibly go, and I have the maximum amount of movement between my shoes. Now that gives me a lot of play here and just a lot more freedom in terms of how I can move this shoe around, which should help me get this spring out. But like I said, this spring is just, it is wrapped around in that hole and it does not want to let go. So this is always the hardest part of this brake job for me. Oh my God. Whew. Here we are. Whoa! All right, well, that fell apart a lot easier than I wanted. So what I was gonna say is, I'm gonna remove this front side shoe here. This one is attached to the e-brake. So when I pull this one out ever so gently, down here is the e-brake portion. Now there are a bunch of fancy tools you can use to detach this, but I'm just gonna use my hands. And we've got a little bit of slack here on that cable. So sometimes I'll move this up and I'll put vice grips there. This one's not super strong, so I can just actually do it by hand. So I'm gonna pull this spring up and then in through that slot. And once it's in that slot, we're free sailing. Just pulling that out, and here, so we remember we took it out like this. So here is our other shoe. So here we have both of our shoes in their correct order with everything assembled. And now we're just gonna carefully take everything apart. These two pieces, as well as this little piece underneath for the e-brake, don't come in a new kit and typically will not come in any drum brake kit. We're just gonna be replacing the springs, and these little clips, those are what come in the hardware kit. So we're gonna remove this piece, and this piece one at a time and swap everything over from old shoes to new shoes. Now I'm gonna go through all of my parts and just make sure that I have all the new stuff that matches the old stuff. So obviously this box of shoes came with 4 of them. I already did the other side, but making sure that my pins line up, that the holes line up, and that everything is correct so that if everything goes back together and it doesn't fit quite right, I'm not wondering what it could possibly be, right? I know that it's just maybe an adjustment issue or something like that. I also ordered the full hardware kit from PowerStop. I mean, like I said, I just got the whole entire upgrade kit for the truck, front, rears, everything. You've got the calipers, the powder coated calipers for the front, even though no one's ever gonna see them. So let's start with this one because there's less to switch over. So we've got this spring. Now I can move this over. Before I install it though, I'm just gonna clean off all this old dirt. Then installing this onto our shoe. I'm actually gonna use a little bit of brake lube here. We do have this little packet that comes in the kit, but I'm gonna be using this, and I'll link this in the description below. Now, if you don't do a ton of brakes like I do, it might not be worth it for you to buy this whole thing, but I don't know, I like it. And it's purple. I always like over lube these and then I end up having to wipe a ton off. We don't want it to be too lubed. And like so. And then our new spring. Okay, so this one is essentially done now. So I'm gonna set this one aside and move on to the other shoe. Alrighty. So now we have this one. I'm just gonna do this nice and slowly, one at a time. First, I'm gonna start tackling these 2 little clips. I'm sure that I have all of the new clips to replace them. I can just go in there with a pair of dikes and cut them off, which is kind of what I like to do. So let me show you how I do that. So I have one side of my dikes in between the seam there of the C-clip, and the other one is just on the pin, and I'm squeezing. And there we go. That should, in theory, separate the 2. Once they're separated, that will allow me to get a little flathead in there. Now I'm not reusing these. Sometimes you have to reuse these if you forget to buy the hardware kit or something, and then you can't be aggressive with these, but for the sake of time and ease, and since I have so many of these, I'm just gonna pull these off. So that dropped out this piece. So we're gonna go ahead and clean that. So we know that's gonna go there. Now these larger springs are directional, so you do want to make sure that you match up this one. This is our star wheel adjuster, and you can see it's actually reverse threads. I'm threading it in, but I'm going like lefty-loosey, which is really confusing. But this is just so that on both of the brakes on either side, if you need to adjust them, you're gonna be pushing the star wheel in the exact same direction, whether you're on the left or the right-hand side, or driver or passenger side. And it's especially if you're up north or somewhere where, you know, things rust really easily, you wanna make sure for sure that you lube this up really well so that it doesn't seize in there and you can actually adjust it over time as needed. Just gonna put a little lube right in there and right in there. And then this piece goes up in here. And that like so.
And once that spring is installed, then I can put on this outer e-brake bracket to complete our little spring shoe sandwich. And now it's time to clip them all together with these little horseshoe circlips. They start out in a U shape, and then you squeeze the ends together with a pair of pliers until they seat snugly into the groove on that pin that's built into the shoe.
Now that we have our shoes all set up and ready to be installed, I'm going to clean the brake drum backing plate. And you can see I've just got a box underneath here. This is a box that the drum came in. So I've got that underneath, so everything is just gonna drip right down on there, make it super easy to clean up. And then I'm going to replace my wheel cylinder. I'm actually gonna back up and put a mask on, even though this is clearly not asbestos. I just always sort of treat every brake job as if it is asbestos. I mean, you don't wanna be breathing this stuff in anyway. Another thing that we're gonna clean up while we're here is this sealing surface. Now, I just had all these studs out, and normally it would have just been so easy to clean it then, but for the sake of this video, I'll just show you how I would do it. You're not gonna be removing the studs, you know, every single time you do a brake job. So here actually, there is a 1 one-time use paper gasket. You can actually see this in the parts diagram from Toyota when you're looking at the repair manual or when you're looking at the exploded diagram. I've actually never replaced this gasket that sits in between the hub and the drum. It's basically just to prevent corrosion. Now this would be really important, I think, for anyone who lives up north where you've really got a lot of rust and where the drums really tend to seize onto the hubs. We don't have that problem here, so instead of buying this gasket, I'm just gonna clean all this off as best as I can, and then I'm gonna put some grease here when I go to put the drum back on. All right, so that looks pretty good. Basically, I mean, I wasn't going all crazy. I just went in and just made sure that anything that was raised up or that would have caused any unnatural run out or anything like that of the wheel, which is very unlikely anyway, is off of there. So yep, nice smooth surface. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to swap out my wheel cylinder. Once again, there is nothing wrong with this one. It's not leaking, but it just has almost 200,000 miles on it. This is new from the dealership, only $50 my cost, so $100 for both sides. It's just well worth it to do it to me. But of course, once again, you don't have to. So in the back, we've got two 10mm bolts holding this thing on. Okay, so looking at it from behind, what I'm gonna do first actually is with my 10mm wrench, I'm just gonna crack this line here while the wheel cylinder is still mounted to the backing plate. So just a little crack, and then I'm tightening it back up because I'm not looking to lose a ton of brake fluid right now. Not yet, at least, although I'm gonna have to bleed everything. And then I've got my little 10mm socket on my small ratchet here. Look at these little teeny tiny short little bolts. And of course, I already cracked this line loose. I just didn't want to let a ton of fluid out. Of course, we are going to lose a little bit. That's inevitable. Cleaning up the end of this line, a lot of times there's a little bit of the finish will come off, and I just don't want to get that jammed inside and cause it to leak. So, and there's really only one way to install this, but obviously the bleeder is always going to be facing the top. So I always like to go ahead and start this line first. Not a ton of torque on these. You can see I don't even have my hand all the way to the end of the ratchet, so super low torque. Nice. Then of course we want to get all the brake fluid off of everything as quickly as possible because brake fluid is super corrosive and it'll damage paint and all sorts of stuff. All right, so now we're in the home stretch. This is exciting. We're getting ready to assemble everything. So the next step is gonna be lubrication. Now, it's pretty obvious on the Toyota, which I just love. The lubrication points are pretty much just like waving their hands at you, showing like, hey, lube me right here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lube points that are right on the backing plate. Super obvious, super straightforward. I'll also show you in the repair manual right now. Once again, I'm just using this brake lube, and it comes with this brush, but I don't know, I don't want to get it all over the place. So you can see not only that the paint is rubbed away here, but you can see it's also raised. It is intended to be the contact point of the shoe. Here's our old shoe, right? Used to sit right there. So if I flip it over, you can see 1, 2, 3 tabs, right? And you can see that there used to be lube there as well. And you can see that there's a lot of wear in those areas. So that's where they touch the backing plate. And obviously there is some movement when you hit the brakes. So that's gonna keep it from making noise and also help from excess heat buildup. Cool, we're all lubed up and we're ready to go back together. This time I'm actually gonna do it the opposite of the way that I took everything apart. I'm gonna get the shoes in place, and the first thing I'm gonna do before I hook up any of the little springs is use our little shoe retainer springs and clips and hold the shoes in place, and then just sort of move them around to where I need them to be. We don't want to get any grease on the shoe, on the friction material, obviously. So I'm going to change my gloves because these are greasy. Now what I'm going to be doing is installing the shoes with all of their little springs and everybody, all the brackets swapped over onto the backing plate. And of course, now that we've got some lubrication on the backing plate, we just want to be careful we don't want to get any of that lube on the friction material at all, because it sort of embeds itself in there, and then you're just not gonna have a good stopping force. And it can also like warp the, well, on the front it can warp the rotors. I'm not sure if it can actually warp the drums because they're so heavy duty, but we'll see. I'm gonna start with this side. I already know where this is gonna go, so we can take that guy off. And then I just lined up these holes for where I'm gonna be installing the little spring and the little pin. Here's the pin. So I'm gonna be putting it through the back side, and then I've got my finger holding it into place so it doesn't move. Next goes my spring, got my tool handy, and then the little retainer, and I'm gonna try my best to line up the retainer with the way that that little pin is. Yay! Onto the other side. All right, so this is gonna go like so. Here is our e-brake. There is a little guide where the e-brake spring goes. That's behind this lever for the other shoe, so just pushing that into place. And then look at, someone had this little paint line here, which is awesome, so you can see how these two little pieces line up again, in case you were wondering. And then I'm just gonna get this one into position and do the same thing, install our little pin and our little spring. Putting my pin through the back and holding it with my finger. And then of course, here's the challenge. Here is the challenge. I am not left-handed. Let's see if we can do this. Get out! All right, well, ambidextrous today, I guess. Yay! All right, so down here you can see half of my little star wheel, and then I'm gonna be installing this one on this side. Like I mentioned before though, we're definitely gonna put some lube in here. I'm also gonna put a little bit on this side, but I'm gonna do that afterwards. I'm sliding it into position. But I'm keeping this spring on the outside because we're gonna be putting that into this hole, but not until later. Now that it's in position, I will go ahead and put a little bit of lube in there. And as I push in, I'm pushing back on the other shoe just to slide it into place there. So we got a couple holes going on over here. We're gonna be putting this spring into this hole. Oh my gosh, go in there. There we go. The hardest part about this is just making sure that this is lined up. That alignment is so hard. I love these little paint marks that the previous person had here, so I just make sure that everybody's lined up properly here. Next, I'm just going to attach this spring. And now we have this little purple spring from our kit that replaces the old one we had here. Now we're going to connect the bottom of both of the shoes together. That's the proper way to use a screwdriver. Hey, whatever it takes to get the job done, right? Okay, there we go. And last but certainly not least for our hardware kit, we have this piece right here, which once again is directional, so you make sure that you grab the right side for the right side. The factory one is stamped R and L. This one is not stamped, but you just match them up with the factory piece. So here is the one that we took off. It's got an L, L for left, left for driver's side in this case. And then it's corresponding little spring. And these are the last two pieces that came in our Power Stop drum brake hardware kit. All right, and this little guy is gonna slide onto this pin. I'm gonna put a teeny little bit of lube. You shouldn't even be able to see any purple there. This little piece right here with this little indentation, I'm also gonna go ahead and lube that because that little piece is gonna go underneath our star wheel adjustment part. Oh, it's getting in there is a little bit like a puzzle. It's hard to see once it's installed, but on this piece, okay, so there it is out here. This is where one side of our little spring goes, and then the other side is gonna hook right here on the shoe. So we'll do the one on the inside first, because it's a little bit harder. There we go. And then once again, grabbing my little handy dandy hook tool, and this is probably the easiest spring to install. And you get a little bit of a reprieve with that one. All right, and that is everything assembled. Now we're gonna adjust it. Yay! The shoes are on with all of our new hardware kit and our new wheel cylinder, and I guarantee you, if you've made it this far, you have done the hardest part by far. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna prep and clean our new drum. Now, if you're reusing the old drum or you decided to have them turned, that is also fine. Then this next step absolutely applies. We're gonna be cleaning off the drum with a little bit of brake clean, or a lot bit of brake clean, and then we're gonna adjust the shoes now to make it easier to adjust everything to that final adjustment when the drum is on and the wheel is on and we're using our little star wheel access from the rear. That can be a little challenging, adjusting everything from the rear. So we're gonna get this as close as possible when we're right here and everything is open and easy to adjust. So I'm gonna show you how to do that, but first let me grab our new drum. Next, we're gonna verify that we ordered the right parts, just like you do with the shoes, matching everything up, matching all of our springs up, making sure everyone is present and accounted for. We're gonna do the same with the drum. So I'm gonna remove the new one from the box, and I'm going to make sure that the outer circumference is the same, the inner diameter is the same, as well as the bolt pattern is the same, and the height is the same. All those things could vary. However, PowerStop makes it pretty easy on their website. You just put in your make and model, and there was only one option for an upgrade kit for the Tacoma. So ta-da, here it is. And here's the part number. I'm also gonna highly encourage that you keep all of your old shoe parts, because, you know, maybe not the shoes themselves, but at least all the springs and everything, because you never know if you're gonna need one, or in the future, if you accidentally fling one across the shop. Trust me, I've done it multiple times. Obviously the broken things you can go ahead and throw away, but I always hold on to all of my old parts. Even saved my old wheel cylinders. All right, let's get this out of here. Now to adjust our shoes. Now this tool is not entirely necessary. You can use a tape measure, but it just makes it so much easier to use this tool, and it's extremely cheap. This is called a brake shoe resetting gauge. And this upper portion here is gonna go against the shoes themselves, and this inner portion is going to measure the drum. Basically, the concept of this is I'm going to measure the drum at its largest width, I think is right there, tighten it down, and then I'll be able to transfer that to my shoes. So the whole idea is that when you step on the brakes, you're pumping fluid into this little wheel cylinder. The wheel cylinder pushes out on the shoes against the drum. Now, you don't have a ton of pedal travel, right? You don't have an infinite amount of brake fluid you're going to be pumping back in here. There's really only a little bit of movement that those shoes are going to do. So we want to adjust them to the outermost limit of their travel without hitting the drum. Well, you want like a little bit of drag. We'll talk about that in a second. And otherwise, if you don't adjust them now, once you get the drum on, once you get the wheel on, first of all, you're gonna hit the brakes and nothing's gonna happen. But second of all, trying to adjust the shoes all the way out with the little star wheel by just going through that tiny little slot in the back, that can take a lot of time. So getting them as close as possible before the drum is actually on just saves you a bunch of time and a bunch of headaches. So, all right, let's go ahead and let's actually do this. All right, so loosen that back up just a little bit. You don't want it like super loose. You want it to be able to slide fairly easily. And then we're gonna keep an eye on this white part of the gauge. We'll watch it move. We wanna find the widest part of the drum, which is of course gonna be straight across. Okay, it's looking like it's right about there. And I'm gonna transfer that up to the widest part of the shoes, which is pretty much going to be where these two little pads sit. And you can see that is really loose, so we would be doing a ton of adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that star wheel until I get kind of close. And of course, this little guy right here is going to keep that star wheel in place. So if you need to push this out or move this out of the way while you adjust, then you totally can. And obviously in the back, there is a slot that is open where you can also fit the tool if you need to, but I think it's a lot easier to do it this way. And we're just gonna start pushing the star wheel that is moving the shoes in an outward direction. And now, fun fact, like I mentioned earlier in this video, this one is
reverse thread. And the point of that is so that you are always going to be turning the star wheel in the same direction, whether you're on the driver or passenger side, to adjust the shoes both outward and inward. So that's kind of cool. So when you're facing the front of the vehicle, we're going to be rotating the star wheel in a counterclockwise direction to move them out and a clockwise direction to move them back in. And while I'm going, we'll just give a little check. Getting closer, but nowhere near where we need to be. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm starting to stretch the spring. So you'll notice that as you get closer, it is going to be harder to turn the star wheel. That's nothing you've done wrong. You're just now fighting that spring tension, which is part of the design. So, ooh, we're getting closer. Also too, these might adjust a little unevenly. So like, see how much motion we have back and forth? So if you're adjusting these and it's perfect via our tool, but the drum doesn't fit on, we're just gonna give these guys a little bit of a slide back and forth. So I'm just gonna adjust them a little bit more and then we'll do a trial fitment. Ooh, there, that's what we want. That's what we want. Oh my gosh, see how they're sticking, they're scuffing. Okay, that means I'm really close. So let's go ahead and clean up the drum and do a test fit.
Here is the proper drum brake adjusting tool. I think it's called a spoon. I might have made that up. Maybe a spoon is officially more, but this is what I was using. I was just using my little pocket screwdriver because there's not enough room in there. There's not a ton of room in there, but I might switch to this one in a little bit. Also, you notice that I have the original box right here because I'm gonna be cleaning the drum onto the box and protect my lift from getting a whole bunch of brake cleaner on it. Now, I'm gonna clean this drum and I'm just gonna use brake parts cleaner. Technically, I think the proper way to clean the brakes is with soap and water. I don't have running water in my shop. I'm not gonna clean it with soap and water. I've never cleaned it with soap and water. I think once I did it for a video, just because I was trying to show like the proper way to do things. Shoot me, I'm doing it this way. Bring it to the edge of, ooh, that's almost the edge. Bring it to the edge so it's tilted down. And you're probably thinking, but these drums are so clean. Yes, they are, but they have a substance on them that keeps them from rusting and corroding in the box. So we're just gonna go ahead and clean that off. Awesome, and you always wanna clean these before you test fit them because we don't wanna transfer any of that coating onto the new shoes. One thing I'm gonna do too is, do you see the marks that I have here for where I put those bolts through in order to release the other drum? I'm gonna line those up. Well, did I just nail it? Oh, I think I just nailed it. One time go. All right, well, that's why you use the gauge, people. I'm gonna take these off though. Okay, well, I don't know, it slid off a little easy. It slid off a little easy. But do you hear how it is rubbing a little bit? That's what you want. Hear that? You just want a little bit of rub. Just a little bit of rub. All right. Now it does slide off really easy, but we'll see. I mean, we might have to adjust it a little more. But before I put the drum back on and put some lug nuts on and bleed the brakes and actually test it, I'm gonna put some lubrication here. Just have this big thing. At the machine shop, we call this elephant paint, not because of the color, but because there's so much in one of these containers that you can use it to paint an entire elephant. And I'm just going crazy on this. And while I'm at it, we're putting a little bit on those lugs as well. Oh yeah, see how that's, yeah, I like that. I like that. Alrighty. Awesome, so I'm feeling really good about the adjustment of these. Of course, the next thing I'm gonna do is bleed the brakes and then actually go out on a test drive, break in these new shoes on our new drums, and then just come back, get the car up in the air again, and just double check and make sure everything is good. So if you're interested in learning how to bleed brakes, to keep this video short, I'm not going to include it in this video because I have a whole how-to DIY just about bleeding brakes, and I'm going to link that in the description below, so go ahead and check it out if you're interested.
Just got back from the test drive and bedding the brakes, and the brakes do feel really good, but I'm going to make them just a little bit tighter. So I'm going to show you how to adjust them with the wheels on the truck. Now, a few things I want to note here. When you're first bedding the shoes, you do want to get them pretty hot to allow that transfer of brake shoe material to the drum. And in this case, since I replaced the front pads and rotors at the same time, I just followed the braking procedure that PowerStop recommends for their front brakes, which consists of 5 moderate to aggressive stops from 40 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour in rapid succession, followed by another 5 stops from 35 down to 5, also in rapid succession. Then drive for 5 minutes at a moderate speed to cool them off, and just making sure that during that time, you're never coming to a full stop, just because you don't want those shoes to sit against the drum or, pads against the rotor and then just sear there. That can cause some warpage. You don't want that. Now, when you get back from your test drive, place a vehicle in park, but do not set the e-brake. You want to allow the brakes to cool a little bit before adjusting them so you don't burn your fingers, because during this procedure, the brakes will get very hot and they will smell, and sometimes they smoke a little bit as the coatings burn off. But don't freak out. This is totally normal. I like to do my final checks and adjustments after the break-in when the brakes have warmed up, because then I know my adjustments are accurate since everything has settled into its final location. And the heat also causes a little bit of expansion, and it can make your final adjustment tighter than you'd like if you're just setting everything when it's cold and letting it go.
Now, if I want to adjust them, I don't have to go back up on the lift at all. What I'm going to do is go underneath, and this right here is our star wheel is on the other side of this. So I'm going to open that up, and in there you're going to be able to see the star wheel. There it is. So now remember, you're pushing up or counterclockwise here on the driver's side, but it's going to be the same for both. You're going to be pushing counterclockwise on the driver's side and clockwise on the passenger side. So no matter what, you're always sort of pushing up on both of the star wheels. And what I'll do to adjust them is I'll just do a little bit at a time. It's much easier to tighten them than it is to loosen them. So what I will do is, if it's something where I feel like it needs a huge adjustment, I'll do 7 clicks on each side, but just to start in this case, I'm gonna do 3 clicks on each side. And one thing I like to do as well is I will take my thermal gun to every single one of the wheels and just verify that there's no one wheel that is overheating, because that could indicate that you have a shoe that's sticking or you've got your brakes a little bit too tight. And if you don't feel any drag, there's a very good likelihood that they're fine, but I just double check everything because I'm neurotic. All right, so there we go.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that this helped you do the drum brakes on your 2nd generation Toyota Tacoma or whatever else you're doing drum brakes on today. So appreciate you. Look for my next videos. I've got a whole playlist of the Tacoma. You can see that as well linked in the description, so you can see also how we got it to this state. And then of course all the tools that I used and all the products and parts and stuff that I used, I will link below as well to help you guys out. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for supporting my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!